Okay, hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be going over my top 10 books, my top favorite books for my birthday. My birthday was yesterday, March 11th. So I just wanted to do something fun and just to like celebrate the books that I love, because I think I tend to be a bit of a hater and I tend to focus on criticism, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I also think that it's important to love as much as you hate, and I'm just quieter about what I love. But I do deeply love a lot of books, and these are my top 10. The stack is right here. So I'm just going to be going over those and talking a little bit about why I love them, kind of selling you on them basically. And if you notice that I'm wearing the same outfit I wore in my birthday book haul video, you would be correct. I mean, it's the same day. What do you want me to say? And if you see me blinking a lot or like doing this, like closing my eyes, I got new contacts and they are really uncomfortable. So anyways, let's get into the video, and we're starting from basically my least favorite, and moving down towards my like favorite book of all time. And that's really hard for me. I love all these books like they're my children, but I think I can sort of rank them from, okay, this book is my favorite, but this book is my favorite. So the positions of these could all probably swap around like one or two places, but it is vaguely in order. So let's just get into it. First up is Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. This is a series that is weird because it's like, I feel like a lot of people who like this series are attached to it because of nostalgia. Like they read it when they were a kid and they really enjoyed it. I read this after I watched the movie, and I only watched the movie because I knew the show was coming out. So I watched the movie pretty late. I read the book after I watched the movie, and I ended up really enjoying it. I mean, I love the show, and I think the show elevates the material of the book, but I think that they wouldn't be able to do that in the first place if the book was bad. Like, I genuinely think that this book is really interesting, and what Anne Rice did was so interesting, and she really redefined the vampire genre, and had a very interesting idea, and I think her prose is quite good in this one. I think she kind of loses it later in the series very quickly as she got, so popular that she was basically able to fire her editor. We can tell, but this book I think is just very solid. I think the framework of the interview can kind of hobble her sometimes, but mostly she uses it very well and very effectively. So I do love this book, although I do think the show is, again, I feel like the show has elevated the material, and I would say I probably like the show a little bit more, but I still do like the books and consider them favorites. So I'm trying to finish the whole series, the whole Vampire Chronicles. People are like, oh, there's more? Like, how many are there? Girl, there's 16. Is it 16 or is it 12? I'll put the number up on screen, but there's over 10 Vampire Chronicle books, and we get wild in those last like 3 books, and I want to get to them so bad because I think they would be like wild in a fun way. So I really want to get to those books, but I'm stuck in like the middle area. Like, okay, the first 3 books are good, and then the last 3 books are like fun bad. The middle like 6 books are just very inconsistent and are slogs at times, because again, she was able to she had an editor, and she had like a copy editor who would fix like typos and stuff, but she basically didn't have to listen to her editor at all. Like if her editor was like, cut this character out, cut this plot out, she didn't have to listen to them. She didn't have to take it into account, and that leads to a lot of stories where the plot is very repetitive or very stretched out, or the pacing is weird, or there's a character who's just pointless, and it really shows. It's like, I think what those middle books do, they still are really great in terms of character. Like there's still a bunch of characters that I really enjoy, and like character moments that I really enjoy, but the plotting and the pacing is just so bad. Like, I swear to God, I skipped like 400 pages of Memnoch the Devil because just the like first 200 and last 200 pages mattered. So I'm trying really hard to get past those middle sloggish books, but I'll get there eventually. Anyways, I like Interview with the Vampire though, and I special ordered this cover from the UK. Next is Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu. I think that's actually not even his full name, isn't it? I thought it was J. Sheridan Le Fanu. But anyways, I have always loved this book ever since I saw the YouTube web series back in 2016, maybe 2014. Yeah, I did watch that. Is it good? No. Was it fun? Yes, that was my first kill, basically. That was my like shitty lesbian show that is objectively quite bad, but just so fun that you like can't care. So I first watched the web series when I was a young teen, and then I did read the book because again, it's like so short and it's open access, you can find it everywhere. And I really loved the book, and I thought for its time it was so interesting. And I think, there's so much you can get out of this book and so much you can criticize, but also so much you can investigate. And I think that's so interesting that there's still so much to discuss about this book and like why it is the way it is, the framing narrative that he uses, the kind of metaphor of like women's sexuality, especially lesbian sexuality, and how the Victorians were so threatened of that and how they viewed it as like, you know, evil. Like Camilla's evil. She just seduces women and kills them. She's evil. But also how their relationship in this book is written with such a tenderness, and like there is genuine love and affection there, and how like he doesn't make Carmilla out just to be this like fake evil monster. Like she is genuinely a sympathetic character who loves Laura, and Laura, you know, doesn't marry. Laura stays is still single when we see her at the end of the story, and she's, you know, well into her 20s, which back in those days was an old spinster. So I just love this book. I really love this edition. I think it's so shiny and so beautiful, so I'm glad I got this one. And then I have Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. My Catholic heads will know. This book it's one of my favorite classics, I think, and it's funny because I don't think it's objectively better than a lot of the other classics I like, but like it's so specifically geared towards me. There's so much good stuff in this book. Basically, I mean, if you've ever seen Saltburn, I haven't, but I've heard people say it's very Saltburn-esque. It's about this like, well, he's not really lower class, but it's about this man who befriends this very rich old Catholic family in London, and he becomes like fast friends with their son, and it is a very homoerotic relationship. It's very heavily implied that they're, you know, like we know what's going on there. Even his dad is like, so are you guys? And it's about how Sebastian, the friend he makes, like slowly just crumbles under the weight of his family's expectations and like falls deeper and deeper into depression and alcoholism, as the main character also like struggles with loving Sebastian versus loving the family and like having to pick sides, and how he kind of can never be a part of the family because he's not Catholic and because he wasn't born noble. And it's great stuff. I do think it is so good for so long. And there's also like a romance with Sebastian's sister, and there's all of this talk within the book that like he's attracted to Julia because she reminds him of Sebastian, like Sebastian was the forerunner. And I find all of that to be so fascinating in the way that we deal with that, and the way that that's brought up, and the way that like but anyways, I love all that stuff. And then I do think this book takes a sudden turn at like the like last 10% into like Catholic propaganda. I don't like that Sebastian falls out a hole in the back of this book in the latter half, because I think we did need like a final, not confrontation, but like to tie up that relationship. Like I feel like we learned that he's just like off doing his own thing off page, and I don't know if that's entirely satisfying. I think we needed like one final scene between them. And then I also think, again, it takes a very sharp turn into like Catholic propaganda in like the last 10%, because Evelyn Waugh was Catholic and very Catholic at that. And I think he actually came like later in life to be like, I regret writing this book more than I regret anything else in the world because it was too gay, which I think is funny, because the gay stuff is all the best stuff about this book. It's the Catholicism that kind of weakens it, because the moral of the story almost ends up being that, well, they were all miserable, but at least they were Catholic. So if you don't mind that, if you don't mind it kind of taking a sharp turn at the end, I still really enjoy it, and I still really enjoy it every time I read it, and it still gets a lot of emotion out of me. So I can't believe we almost got a Luca Guadagnino adaptation of this starring Andrew Garfield. We lost so badly, but there is a very good, very faithful like 1980s miniseries adaptation of this book from, I think, like BBC Granada, I think they're called, but it's a very good adaptation. It's starring Jeremy Irons and someone else I don't know. I've watched like 6 episodes. It's like literally a shot-for-shot recreation of each chapter. So good adaptation, I do recommend it. Next is The Death of the Necromancer by Martha Wells. This is a book that I only read recently, but that very quickly climbed to like the top of my list. I don't know why I love this book so much. Like, it is a vaguely Sherlock Holmes inspired fantasy, almost steampunk mystery set in a fantasy city that's like on the verge of industrialization, following our kind of gang of misfit almost criminals. We are following the like Moriarty type figure in this book, which I think is such a fun way to do like a Sherlock Holmes inspired book. And so he's got his Moran, he's got his Irene Adler / mix of a lot of other like Sherlockian women, and it's just a really fun story. It's a really fun magic mystery story, and it's weird because I don't really like mysteries, but I do like fantasy books with mystery subplots, or even fantasy mysteries. Like I also recently read The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, one of those is his name, Robert J. Bennett, and I really enjoyed that, which is like mostly a mystery with fantasy trappings. So I don't know, I just really loved this book. I really loved the relationships between Nicholas, the main character, and all of his friends, his like little gang of criminals. I felt like there was a lot of, it wasn't found family, but it was like, you could tell that they all really cared about each other. And it was so interesting how like they had spent all this time prepping this revenge plot and like have it all go off the rails at the last minute, and how they like all tried to rally for that. Very fun. You could never like predict where it was going, but you could always like see in hindsight like how we led up to that. So that's something I enjoy in a mystery, in like a more mystery book. And then I really liked the world building. I think this world that Martha Wells has, I think it's called like Ile Rien or something. Ile Rien, it's French. I don't know, guys, I don't speak French. I took Spanish in high school. I think that world is so interesting, and especially the time of the world that we're in now is so good. And I was very happy to see the characters who are in this book pop up in the trilogy set in this world later. They are a big part of it in like the latter half of that book, so I was very happy about that. Even though I didn't end up loving that trilogy, I liked it but didn't love it. I really recommend this one. It has been republished as the Book of Ile Rien, I think is what it's called, and it's her debut novel, The Element of Fire, which takes place like 100 years before this, and The Death of the Necromancer. So I do recommend both of them. I recommend that version, but I had to buy them separately because I really loved this book and I thought Element of Fire was just okay, and then I also loved this cover. So again, new favorite, but I really enjoyed this. I also would say I really enjoyed City of Bones by Martha Wells. I really like her old fantasy, and I'm excited to read Queen Demon eventually. Then my next favorite is Eleanor Arneson's Ring of Swords. I feel like this is a really niche one, but I love this book. This is a sci-fi story written in the 1990s, and it's basically about humanity encountering this alien species and going to war with them because their species is very warlike, and they've been at war for like 40 years, capturing prisoners on both sides, and they are finally like meeting up for basically preliminary peace talks. And the main character of this book, Anna Perez, kind of gets involved in these peace talks without wanting to. She is kind of just like, she kind of just wants to study her alien jellyfish in peace. She's like a biologist, but she gets caught up in these negotiations and ends up being a big part of them, and we get to learn so much about the aliens and their culture. What I think really interested me about this book, I actually read a short story set in this universe first because I took a science fiction short story class in college, and her short story set in this universe, Potter of Bones, was the like first book in that collection, and I really loved Potter of Bones. It's a story about like one of these alien women like very far in the past inventing basically like what is it called, archaeology, paleontology. She's like finds out how to date bones, and I thought that was so cool. It was such a great story, and what I really loved about that story was that the aliens were predominantly gay. Like the alien woman in that book was primarily having relationships with women, and that's how their society worked. They were primarily gay, and straight was like the non-normative identity, and they had all these social rules around it and like how they like continued on the species, and it was all very structured. And I thought that was so interesting and such a fun thing to see, and that, you know, it's the same species in this book just set in the future when they have gone to space. So I really love that aspect of this. I think, you know, you can criticize it definitely for being too binary. Like we don't really see any bisexuals in this, and we also don't see any trans people in this, but I do think that like the concept of using a species that has a normal sexuality, a normal state of affairs that is opposite to ours, is such a great idea to show, to criticize, and to explore our own culture. And I think that was very much what this story was doing in the 1990s. It reminded me a lot of Ursula K. Le Guin's early sci-fi work, and she's been compared to Ursula K. Le Guin a lot, but I think Eleanor Arneson was very specifically interested in like sexuality and in like the study of cultures and cultures meeting, whereas Le Guin I think was more focused on just like a lone person entering another culture and more general themes of like feminism and othering and stuff like that. So I felt like they're similar writers, and if you like Ursula K. Le Guin, I do really highly recommend Eleanor Arneson and Ring of Swords, but I think she is unique enough that it doesn't just feel like a ripoff, and she very much feels like her own thing, and I really enjoyed this book, again, so much that I hunted down like a nice physical copy of it, and I'm glad I did. I mean, does this have anything to do with the story? Absolutely not, but it's a very pretty cover, and I did spill coffee on this, but it still looks fine. So this book also has a lot of Shakespeare in it, which I found so fun. Like I love Shakespeare, and I love that the aliens and the humans bonded over Shakespeare, so there's just a lot of good stuff in this book. I want more people to read it, I really do, because it is so good and so well crafted, but it's just very niche, and I would like to spread the word. So Ring of Swords by Eleanor Arneson. If you read one book from this list, just read this one, okay? Just not because I think it's the best or anything, because this is the one that I really want more people to read. Then I have another sci-fi book. This is Revenant Gun, which is the third book in the Machineries of Empire series by Yoon-Ha Lee. The first book in that series is Nine Fox Gambit. You can see it on my shelf right here. I really love this last book in the series because I really love stories where, in sci-fi or in fantasy, where we are exploring what happens after you defeat like the evil emperor or the evil king. I love stories that really do deeply deal with what comes next. I feel like a lot of fantasy and sci-fi kind of falls into that trap where it's like, okay, we can't explore fixing an entire civilization or society in like 300 pages. We have to kind of pick a villain and make him be emblematic of all of the problems in the society, and he has to be a villain that our heroes can beat and can act like, we did it, we saved the city, we killed this one guy, so everything is fixed. And I get why that happens. Again, I don't expect authors to completely dismantle every aspect of their world society in one book, or even in a trilogy, or even in 5 books. It's just a lot. That's why I do love when books do focus on, okay, we did it, now what? And I think that's what this book does. It is split between 2 timelines, between like 7 years ago when they defeated like the empire basically, and how things went in the like immediate fallout, and then 7 years later when a new enemy kind of emerges from an old enemy basically re-emerges from the shadows and is trying to destroy their new government. So it's a lot of like the, how do we set up a new government? How do we make sure we're not just falling into the same pitfalls as the old government? How do we defend ourselves from outsiders while also, you know, keeping us together and, you know, making sure that everyone is happy and like we're not making things worse for our citizens. So I really liked a lot of that stuff. And then this book does also have the most devastating character ever, Jidao 2, who is like, I'm speechless. I'm speechless. And I really love this series. I really do. And I think this is probably my favorite one in this series. I've read it like 4 times. So I really do recommend this series. And I think people say the first book is confusing. I didn't think it was, even without the benefit of like having read the other books in the series, but I do think if like you read that first book and you're maybe confused about the world building, or you don't understand like what the plot stakes are, definitely continue on, because I think they just get better, and I really did love Revenant Gun. Then the next book on my list is The Tyrant Bar Cormorant by Seth Dickinson. This whole series, again, is one of my favorites, the Masquerade series. You can see him up there. I love Seth Dickinson as an author. I think his prose is just so great. It's like the kind of prose that I really love, where it's not overly flowery, it's not trying too hard, it's very economical. You get what you need, and it's very clearly very intentional, but like every so often there will be a sentence that just is so beautiful and so well crafted that you're just like, yes, thank you for that. And then I also love how distinct his voice is and how distinct each character's voice is. I feel like a lot of the times with multi-POV casts, you can kind of fall into the trap of having everyone sound the same and having everyone talk the same way. And I think that Dickinson really is able to give each character their own voice, sometimes specifically by giving them like a different POV. Like one of the POVs in this book, it talks in first person, whereas the majority of the series is in third, and I really enjoyed that actually. I found that to be such a good way of like getting inside that character's head when they're a character that wouldn't normally like be that transparent with people. Like it was such a good way to distinguish her voice, but also distinguish what kind of a character she was. So I could talk about these books for so long, but I won't. I'll just say that I really love this series, and although it's not finished yet, there's still another book after this that will be coming out, I think, not anytime soon. We don't have a release date for it, but I think probably after next year. I know he said we're not getting it last year or this year, so I'll wait as long as I need to. And I think if you're scared of that, if that scares you off, don't. This is definitely not a Song of Ice and Fire or Kingkiller Chronicles situation where like the series left off on like a super big cliffhanger, or like we still don't even know what the plot stakes are, and it's been like 11 years and we still have nothing. This series ends, or this book ends on like a pretty cathartic note and a pretty satisfying note for me personally. It didn't feel like I'm being dangled over a cliff by my toenails. Like I can wait as long as I need for the next book in this series, and I think it will be very good and very satisfying, you know, if he takes the time to cook it in the oven, and I'm willing to wait for that. And yeah, I just love the series. I feel like a lot of people read the first book, or they used to. We're losing recipes, guys. We're losing Borrowed Cormorant. It used to be a book that like everybody recommended when you were asking for like lesbian fantasy, adult lesbian fantasy, and now it's just not mentioned at all. I think because there have been other books published since then that kind of also fill that niche, and I don't begrudge that at all. Like, I love seeing the Jasmine Throne be mentioned. I love seeing people say Jasmine Throne, they say Gideon the Ninth. I haven't read Gideon the Ninth, but I love Jasmine Throne. People say She Who Swallowed the Sun, which I also love. People say The Unbroken, which is also a great book. I haven't read it, but I've heard it's a great book. So there's just other books that fill that niche now that are more recent that people recommend instead of Trader Borrowed Cormorant, where I feel like there was a time when it would be one of the go-tos, like the Holy Trinity. Like, people would recommend, and people also recommend Priory of the Orange Tree. People would, back in my day, people would recommend Priory, Gideon the Ninth, and Borrowed Cormorant. That was like the big three. And other books have just been published since then and series have been finished since then that have taken that niche. And so I feel like we just don't see a lot of people talking about Trader Borrowed Cormorant anymore, which is sad to me. So I wanted to make it clear. The Trader Borrowed Cormorant is an amazing book, and it is a series. I feel like, again, that was the problem with a lot of the like word of mouth marketing around the book before, that people would just read Trader, that they either wouldn't realize it was a series, or the thing that happens at the end of Trader would kind of put them off from reading the rest of the books, even though Trader is really just the beginning. Like, it is a good book, and I actually at first did read it as a standalone. Like, I just read the first book and then I didn't continue on with the series for like almost a year. But then I was so glad I did, because I feel like it's a kind of an Annihilation, Southern Reach situation for me, where it's like the first book is so almost simple and elegant in what it is trying to do, and so it is able to achieve that very well and feel very satisfying and almost feel like a standalone in that sense. But then the rest of the series opens up the world so much and opens up what the character actually wants and needs, and kind of starts to actually give you like a cast of characters that you recognize and that come back over and over again, and kind of a character arc for the main character and for all the other characters, and an overarching plot line that gives you questions and answers. And it is so good as a series, and I really do wish more people not only read the first book but continued on with the series, because it is a really great series. And again, you can read the books that are out and feel satisfied and feel like you can wait for the next one. And yeah, please read the series, please. Also, something that I think is funny is there's praise from Yoon-Ha Lee in this. We just talked about Yoon-Ha Lee, and he's here. Next on the list is Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. This is one of the Realm of the Elderlings books. This is the third book in the Farseer trilogy, which is the first series in that like larger series. I really love this book. For me, this is where I really got hooked. Like, I read Assassin's Apprentice and thought it was like cute, fun, like Fitz, liked the writing, but it just wasn't anything special to me. Like, it was good, but not my favorite. And then I read Royal Assassin, and that definitely pushed me into immediately reading Assassin's Quest, because the stuff that happens at the end of that book is so wild, and you're like, how can she do this to her main character? How can she do this? And then Assassin's Quest to me was what just really got me super hooked on the series. After this, I started devouring these books and couldn't stop reading them. And I think it is just such a great story, especially the first half is kind of slow. It's a lot of Fitz traveling with Night Eyes. I like Night Eyes, so I don't mind that. I think on reread it is a lot slower. You're like, I know none of these characters are important, and I know none of them come back, so get me into the mountains. But what I really love about this book is, again, that last half where Fitz goes to the Mountain Kingdom and goes on this little quest with all his friends, the Assassin's Quest, if you will, the Ass Quest, as this book is unfortunately often shortened to. And I just love that group of characters. I love the squad. I love Fitz and the Fool and Night Eyes and Starling and Ketrican and Kettle. Like, it is just such a fun group. Also interesting that it's mostly girls. Isn't that fun? The girl squad and Fitz. The girls, the gays, and Fitz. And I love that little group. I love the quest they're on. I love the Fool and Fitz. This is where I really sat up and I was like, oh, people aren't exaggerating. I thought you guys were just like wearing your gay goggles like I am most of the time. Like, they're actually, oh, okay. And so I love this book. It is, again, one of my favorite in the series. I think mostly because, not mostly, but some of it is definitely the nostalgia, or like the feelings I felt when I first read it, and just knowing that this was gonna be a series that I ended up really, really enjoying. That was when I knew. This book was when I knew. But I still do love this book just on its own terms and on its own merit. So like, if you have, like me, read Assassin's Apprentice and just was like, meh, I don't see what people are, hyped about, I'm not gonna finish the series, I try at least finishing Farseer, because for me this was the book that like made it all click for me. And if after Farseer you still don't like it, then fine, drop the series there, but get to Assassin's Quest, finish Assassin's Quest before you decide it's not for you. And then next is Assassin's Fate by Robin Hobb. I actually just bought this book, but again, this is the last book in the Realm of the Elderling series. It is sorry, my spine is broken, but I'll fix her, I'll glue her. This is the last book in the Realm of the Elderling series so far, the last book of the Fitz and the Fool trilogy. This is like the perfect ending. This is the perfect ending. I mean, my perfect ending obviously would be Fitz and the Fool like getting married and having a happy rest of their life together. But this is a close second. This is definitely a close second. And honestly, I might even like it more just because I'm an angst fiend. I love kind of bittersweet endings, and I really love what happens in this book at the end. Like, for me, it was perfect. Perfect. She totally redeemed herself, because what I find funny about Realm of the Elderlings is that it's a series I deeply love, and it's a series I think is very well written, but I think Robin Hobb is a serial ending fumbler. She writes these amazing books, amazing trilogies, and then right at the last like 100 pages drops all of her spaghetti on the floor, and the endings are just like bizarre, and you're like, how did the rest of the book lead up to this? Where did we get this? And I was so pissed with I mean, Assassin's Quest is fine because you're like, okay, whatever. He never saw the Fool again. I don't believe that, but whatever. The ending of Live Ship is, again, very controversial, and I have mixed feelings about it. And then the ending of Donny Man is so bad, I threw the book down in disgust, and only knowing that there was another series after it was what made me not be mad at it anymore. But she didn't fumble with this one. She did not fumble the ending of this one. It was a perfect ending. I'm so satisfied. I think she's gonna come back to this world. She's been saying she will. She's been saying she's writing Realm of the Elderlings books, continuing to write Realm of the Elderlings books, but I'm just so happy that Fitz and the Fool actually got their ending, an ending that I felt like was representative of them and felt in character. And I also think it's so cute. I think it's in this book. Let's see. The dedication. The dedication is to Fitz and the Fool, my best friends for over 20 years. I think that's so cute. More authors should make the dedication be to the protagonists of their books, because I think that's very sweet. And my best friends for 20 years, that's so cute. And yeah, so I love this series, I love this book, I love the ending of the series. Again, if you, like me, are pissed off at the ending of Tawny Man, at the ending of Assassin's Quest, don't worry, she gets there. It took her 20 years, but she got there in the end. And then the last book, what I would consider my favorite book of all time, is The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. Is anybody surprised? No, I really love this book. This is a book about Genli Ai, who is this envoy sent from basically an almost United Nations type peacekeeping galaxy-wide group to this planet that doesn't have space travel. It's called Winter, or Geth in their language. And the people of Geth do not have a sexual binary. Basically, they are sexually neutral for 3 out of 4 weeks of the month, and then 1 week of the month they go into basically Kemmer, which is basically heat, and they have sex and then go back to being gender neutral, basically. So did Ursula K. Le Guin plant the seeds for Omegaverse? I think she might have. But I found the way it's done in this book to be so interesting. I felt like she really was interested in exploring what society and what the world would be like if we didn't have a binary gender. Like, there's no rape in this world because everybody only wants to have sex during Kemmer. And it's very easy to find a willing partner because there are Kemmer houses, which is like a house you can go to if you're in Kemmer, and so everybody's a willing partner there. Because everybody can get pregnant, pregnant people are treated with, dignity and respect. Like, at one point, the king gets pregnant in this book. Great line, the king was pregnant. It just really forces you to think about language and about gender and about gender roles. And I find that so interesting. I think the world building is also so interesting. The kind of eternal winter on Geth, the kind of Antarctic expedition-esque journey they go on at the very end of this book, and the religions on this planet, the idea that some questions are unanswerable and that to not answer them is the answer. I love that concept, and I love this book, and I think it is one of the greatest love stories of all time. It really is. It is a love story that makes me want to rip my hair out and that crushes my heart in its fist, but it is one of the greatest love stories of all time, and I really recommend this book. I think I read it at like the precise time in my life that I needed to read it. It was a time when I was really thinking about gender in general, but also my own gender, and the ice maker just was really loud and distracted me, but it was a time when I really needed to explore all that. And I love this book, and I think it holds up so well. I really recommend reading her essay that she wrote basically after writing this, called Is Gender Necessary? And then the response she wrote to herself basically 5 years later, making notes in the margins being like, I totally disagree with this now, or whatever, because I think it addresses a lot of the common criticisms of this book, and criticisms that I have too and that I think are valid. But I think that's really what made me love Ursula K. Le Guin. Not only this book and how great it was and how I really needed to hear all this stuff, but also seeing her come back and be like, yeah, that criticism is totally valid and I would do it this way now if I could. I really enjoyed seeing that, and it just showed me how open-minded she was and how she was willing to change over the course of her life. And that's how I want to be too. I don't just want to be stuck in what I think is normal. I want to also be ever growing and learning and changing and accepting of people and of identities. So great book. I really love it. And again, please read it. So those were my top 10 favorite books of all time. It was very hard to choose a top 10, but those are the books that I think I will stick with. And now I have to put all those books away, so I'll go now. But thank you so much for watching, and I would love to hear if you also love any of these books, or if you are interested in reading them now, and if so, which ones. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!